Hello, good morning, and welcome to the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. Joining me, as usual, are my good friends and co-hosts, Graham McDonald and Matthew Hanson. And Matthew, happy birthday.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard. I'm definitely over the hill of having sadness for birthdays that come up, but it is a little better when you get a box of these in the mail to start the day from a mysterious admirer, aka Richard. So thank you very much.
The Auto Media Group has a long-held policy of let me talk, Graham. Auto Media Group has a long-held policy of cake on birthdays. It's a little bit more difficult when people are working from home, so it's kind of whatever gets delivered. But what was that, Graham?
Where was my cake then? Well, I don't work. I don't work for you, technically speaking, so that's true. Actually, I was going to say though, Matthew, you were on your way to a minivan. You know that, right? You're going to be checking out the sliding door. More birthdays you're having. You're checking out the sliding door characteristics, the Isofix hooks in the backs of the seats. Come on,
is this a sales pitch? Have you got a minivan on the lot? A nice one, good deal, nice price.
Oh, I could find one for you. Absolutely.
Well, let's just. I mean, I am a enthusiast for minivans, particularly Japanese minivans, or the odd European minivan, not American minivans. But the Honda Stepwagon I used to have, I believe, Matthew, could take a straight swap for a B. It's not a B20. Anyway, the old Type R engine.
Just saying. I've got a Stepwagon. I have the one that you coveted. And you badgered me for years about finding one. I've finally got one. 2010 Stepwagon. It is the family TARDIS. This is not a sales pitch, by the way, because I'm not going to put it on the yard here. I've traded it. But yes, if you're looking for a minivan characteristic for the little bit of the old Honda style.
Oh, but you see, that would be like an RF5, I'm guessing, for some minivan nerds out there.
RK1.
RK1. Mm-hmm. So not a 2010, like a 2000 or something like that.
No, it's a 2010, unless they've swapped over the regular stickers. I mean, this is West Auckland. That's possible, right?
Yeah. Anyway, not as good as the old RF3s and RF4s, the proper boxy step wagons, which I first drove. I first drove one of those back in about 2005 when you lent me one for something back in the old Croydon's days. Very cool vehicle.
Yes.
Very cool vehicle.
Really a bit of history for you. Well, happy birthday anyway, Matthew. So now you get to eat your donuts and talk about industry stuff at the same time.
Now, if you are watching, we do expect happy birthday messages for Matthew to appear in the comments, plus anything else you want to say. Always happy to read out your comments, and great to see that there are people watching. Now, we'll start off with a story that isn't actually in online yet, and one we'll tease for when hopefully it goes out next week. And that is, I sat down and had a chat with interim chief executive of Two Cheap Cars and board member Gordon Shaw. And it was certainly an interesting chat. I can't say a huge amount about it until it goes out, but I think he's fairly confident in the future of the business. They do seem to have a lot of changes coming. I think they feel that David is on the right side of things. David Senior is on the right side of where the issues were in the company. And heard some interesting things about what might be happening. From our understanding, Mr. Eugene Williams is up in Japan at the moment, and you can read from that what you will, and some other senior management may have gone along from the company at about the same time. So, interesting things afoot there. We are looking into it as quickly as we can and trying to get some confirmations on a few things. But we'll have that story out online, I would say, next week, and definitely a really full version in the next magazine. Of course, if you haven't seen it yet, the latest magazine has been out in the last day or so. Really good issue as far as I'm concerned, if solely down to the fact that Mr. McDonald has a column in there. No, there's some really cool stuff in there. We have an interview with the guys at Milner Motors, or what people used to know as Rod Milner Motors, and now it's a mobility-focused company, and they've taken over. And it's a really interesting building, I think, for a used vehicle dealer essentially to take over. And that is the old Mercedes-Benz New Zealand headquarters on Pacific Rise. So, quite a palatial place for a dealership, I guess. But then I suspect that Mr. Milner did rather well from departing his Ellerslie Yard, I would imagine. It's kind of been a bit of a trend in recent years where car dealers seem to make more out of their land than they make out of their dealerships themselves.
Isn't that the way? It's actually a really interesting article too. I mean, you're obviously all going to run away now and read AutoTalk, I hope, from watching the show. But it's actually a really interesting piece about the history of the business and what Rod's done. And I have to say, he's been a real pioneer in that space. And whether you're a competitor or you're not in that particular genre of vehicle, you've got to say Rod has certainly done very well to bring to market a product that there was definitely a gap for, and he's done it and marketed it exceedingly well. And full kudos to him and the family for being in the position where they are now. That's hard earned and fought and well deserved.
And I think the family have done it a bit of a love and passion too, because I believe his sadly long past former wife, he is remarried and quite happy now, I believe, was in a wheelchair, and a lot of this came from the needs and wants and understandings of, I think, the issues around that space. So great on the Milner family. I hope huge success in that new location, and also great to see the second generation of Milners coming through and kind of taking control of that business. I think Rod's swanning around Europe on holiday at the moment, so definitely a good time for him. There's a couple of other stories in there that are really good. Matthew, you had a good chat with Neeraj Lala from Twitter about his Supra.
Yeah. It's always, I mean, it's just pleasant to meet people who work sort of at that level in the industry, who are genuine petrol heads who love cars, and you cannot deny that that's exactly what Neeraj is. He recently, about 10 months ago, purchased a Toyota Supra, the Mark IV, the one everyone wants. Graham, very familiar with those, I'm sure.
Yes.
And it was a fairly straight vehicle, but he basically did a sort of started a nut and bolt restoration with the help of a lot of the different sort of, triggers that you can pull at Toyota if you're a staff member there. Not necessarily if you're, CEO, but if you're any staff member there, you have access to quite a sort of arsenal of things. And obviously, you've also got organisations like North Shore Toyota Parts, who are obviously invaluable in terms of being able to provide genuine Toyota parts for older cars like the Supra. And he's basically turned out an almost factory mint vehicle. It's got aftermarket wheels on it, aftermarket suspension, but basically apart from that, it is a stock as a rock. Mark IV. It's excellent.
I think it was even painted at the Thames facility. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So that was obviously Thames. They're well known for what they do with paint on signature class cars. Not signature range. That's very different. But yeah, a new what do they call it? A flow coat, I think. Paint job on that car. It looks stunning. So they've done a marvelous job.
So it's probably the one factory refurbished Mark IV Supra in New Zealand, if not the world. I mean, I can't imagine that kind of thing happens too often outside of maybe the company's own museum in Japan.
I was going to say, there's such a thing as a Mark IV that's left without an external blow-off valve and a boost controller. No, they didn't used to do that, but there you are. Good try, Richard. Good. No, it was quite neat to see too, because like you said, there's very few Mark IVs sitting in New Zealand that have been taken to that level. I do know somebody who's got one that's taken it back to that particular level as well, but it is kept well under lock and key and wraps and doesn't see the light of day. So good on them. And it's a real, I think, a testament to Toyota. If you think about it, the product brand is so enduring in its history, its recent history of just bringing to market fantastic cars. And we look back 20, 30 years, and there they are in another 20 or 30 years. What are we really talking about that we considered mainstream at the time from Toyota that is also a real mold breaker?
Everything. It's just hilarious to see that if you jump on Trade Me Now and even things like old mid-80s and even early 90s Carinas and Corollas and stuff. I saw an enthusiast video the other day about a specific version of the Toyota Spacio that had a slightly more warm engine in it. It's just hilarious to think what the stuff that's out of that back catalogue that's getting popular. Anyway, let's move on, and we'll go back to our usual spruiking of AutoTalk Live. So we've now got probably one of our most important key speakers for the day. At this stage, going to be opening the day, and that is Simon Bridges. Former leader of the opposition, Simon Bridges, has joined the huge lineup of speakers for November's AutoTalk Live. A lawyer by profession, Bridges has spent 14 years in New Zealand's halls of power, leading the National Party, where he faced off with the formidable Jacinda Ardern. He was highly respected for his long run as the national government's transport minister as well. Graham, you could probably speak to his kind of how he welcomed he was in the trade when he was transport minister. I mean, compared to some of the people we've had either side, he was very open and quite interested in the scene itself.
Well, yeah, more than that. If you've got a passion for the EV sector, you can probably take that back and thank Simon Bridges for the work he did when he was Transport Minister. He was one of the pioneers of taking the industry aside and saying, look, what can we do? I remember there was a summit meeting in Wellington, and David Vincent, if you're watching this, you remember this very well. We went to Wellington together for this, bringing together all the industries. We had insurance companies, finance companies, the energy generators, the lines companies, we had lease companies, dealers coming together in a room and saying, okay, I want to see EVs in the market. What do we need to do to accelerate this? And we had a think tank session for a day in Wellington, and a whole lot of neat ideas came out of that. And he would go away, come back, have his meetings, come back an hour later and say, what have you done? What have you come up with? And one of the pioneers, I think, from a government level of using a combination of government, should I say, intervention, but certainly government assistance to help the trade facilitate EVs, used EVs and new, to the market. He got it. And he helped make it happen. And if you're in the EV sector now, you can lead it back to, I think, some decisions made at that meeting, at that day, led by Bridges, to bring EVs to market and be in the position where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also, as I say, I'm a little bit political. You probably know I'm a little bit politically involved in some of the things that I do. But I have to say, I think he's a much better speaker when you have him in events like this than he was necessarily in front of the media cameras. And as a speaker on a podium in front of an audience, he's an excellent speaker with some pretty good stories to tell. So I think as an opening speaker to set the tone for the day, it should be really good, quite motivational, some good stories, and I say that'll set us in good stead for a very good day ahead.
Yep. No, exactly. So, now we AutoTalk Live-wise, tickets are still selling pretty darn well. Please don't forget to get in now. I know a lot of people are working out how many people they're bringing and who they're bringing, and we asked what the names are. We're actually tweaking the system to perhaps allow you to buy them without putting the names in yet, because I know that's been an issue for some people. If you are struggling with the system or wanting to do that, then just email Deborah, DEBORAH, at automediagroup.co.nz, and she'll be able to handle the sale for you without you having to put those details in at this point. But hopefully we'll have an update next week on some change to the system on that. If we realise it was just one person buying a ticket for themselves, easy. Most people we seem to be ringing a group of 5 or 6, and that might be a case of things shuffled by who's available at the time. So but don't forget, get onto autotalk.co.nz/live and buy those tickets now, because you don't want to miss Simon. And of course, we've got a huge array of other speakers, as we've covered before. On to the next story. QE2, or the Queen Elizabeth's public holiday is getting a mixed reaction from dealers. New Zealand will mark Queen Elizabeth II's death with a state memorial service and one-off public holiday on Monday, September 26. Dealerships intend honouring the occasion, although Winston Peters reckons the one-day holiday will cost the country about $400 million. I'm not sure when the office wrote this, but it reads a little funny in person. Maybe it's been written, one of those stories that's been written very well to be read, but terrible for being read out loud.
Ad hoc, Richard.
Pardon?
Wasn't me.
Genuine Vehicle Group Director and General Manager Hayden Johnson says it will cost New Zealand business during a time of record inflation. Conversely, Christchurch EV City owner Dave Boot says their business model is not adversely affected by a change like this. Is it a storm in a teacup? I'm going to actually talk about something that I was having a chat to the other day with a member of the finance industry. I was speaking with Amos Banbury from one of our great sponsors, One Partner, or Better Finance, as some people may know them as. And at the moment, he's spending time in a few dealerships, actually acting as a business manager or locum, even just looking after the place on weekends, just to brush himself up on the trade. And he was saying that since he kind of left the dealerships a few years back and come back in, he's seen a drastic change. And He said there's just not much walk-in business now as far as he sees. People who arrive are there to do the business. And so if they're not going to transact on the Monday, they'll transact on the Tuesday. Graham, you think that's the case? I mean, are that many people coming into the dealership to necessarily, walk in and randomly buy a car on a Monday?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's a divide here between the new sector and the used sector, and then it depends on your product as well. There's no right answer to that. So in the used marketplace, I think there's a tremendous amount of walk-in business that still occurs. Now, define walk-in. They've probably already done their research before they came in about who they're going to go and see, although surprisingly, we still see a lot of customers that say they're going around the rounds today. They're going to go and visit all the dealers, and they'll come back in the afternoon once they've seen, 25 of the same car and decide who they're going to buy off. We still see a lot of that too.
Isn't that just a negotiation tactic or a way to get you off their backs?
Well, I don't know. And then...
Because I say that.
We hear plenty of stories where people actually have gone, and I've read my cat here, and come back and said, we're going to buy off you because... obviously, this is the best place to buy a car from. There we are, subtle plug. But there's still a lot of walk-in traffic. People have no idea what it is they're going to buy. They just want to come and look at cars. In the new sector, no, I'd say most people have got a pretty damn good idea of what they're going to look at buying, even if it's not quite down to the accessories and the colours. So there's a big gulf between the two. But if you look at what's happening on the proposed, and I don't like calling it a public holiday. To me, it's got the wrong connotation. A public holiday celebrating the death of Queen Elizabeth II. It doesn't sound quite right to me.
Celebrating, I believe acknowledging or mourning is the term you're after.
And look, for most people, let's be honest, most people are going to see it as an excuse to go home and mow the lawns and, bash the kids a couple of times and sit in the lazy boy.
So I suspect if I look for a room in the Bay of Islands next weekend, now it'd be pretty booked out.
Yeah, I wouldn't like your chances there, no, because it's on a Monday and that whole Mondanisation thing. And then if you are a small business, Hayden made a really good point. There's a lot of cost associated. If you choose to open, there's a tremendous amount of additional cost burden put upon you, and it doesn't generate you any more business by being open, but then you close, and then you could argue that it costs you money to stay closed as well. Who's paying for it? You are. As the business owner, you're paying for all of this. So you're having politicians determine make financial decisions on your business time and time again. Public holidays are a really good example where you have no choice but to either close or pay a lot more money for the privilege of everyone else having a holiday, but you.
I suspect what we're seeing is people who are for this. I'm going to say this delicately, and I don't want to necessarily directly apply it to the people talking. If you like the holiday, you probably don't like Jacinda. You like Jacinda. If you don't like the holiday, you probably don't like Jacinda. I think there's a fairly large element of that coming out in the business community. Particularly, look, I can't see car dealerships losing massively. Yes, there will be some costs from a day like this. If I was a retail store that had to close, but I'm not actually sure what the trading rules are around this day. I'm not even sure if it is a.
No, I don't know either.
No. Then if you were forced to close in your retail business, then yeah, probably there's losses. If you're forced to close and you're a hospitality business, then there's definitely losses. I can't see it being a big issue for things. What are you going to do on your day off, Matthew? That I'm paying for?
Exactly.
See? You're losing out, Richard. You're losing out big time. Packing them for a house move, I think. I think the day is just. It's just a good reminder for the dealers that are sort of still playing catch up to shore up their online offerings. People are at home, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be looking at cars.
Good thought.
Those who have good websites and all that sort of thing in place off the back of COVID and everyone being at home and all the rest of it, will probably be less affected. But as we all know, people looking at a car online is one thing. People going and actually buying it is something else.
Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting one to throw you. Think of all those poor dealerships that have got, basically recycle the same marketing material every year on a cycle and have all their big signs for Queen's Birthday weekend sales or their digital marketing stuff they recycle every year for Queen's Birthday weekend. You've got to change it. Sorry.
Well, how actually inconvenient of it to die on us.
Hey, it's been 70 years. I think it was yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
Now New affordable EVs confirmed for New Zealand. New Zealand will soon have a new combatant in the economy EV space in the form of the Mahindra XUV 400 EV. Mahindra New Zealand spokesperson has confirmed to AutoTalk that the plug-in compact crossover is destined to arrive in local showrooms in 2023. Meanwhile, MG Motor New Zealand has announced that the fully electric MG4 hatch is set to join the brand's lineup from mid-2023. MG Motor Chief Executive for Australia and New Zealand, Peter Chow, has outlined how strong demand for the model is in Europe, and it's likely to mean a struggle for supply. Same issue they've kind of had with the ZS. They've for all the hype around that car, they've actually gotten very few down to New Zealand in comparison to what you'd expect there. And hopefully they've got a little bit better supply for the second generation or the facelift version of that. Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is we will see more EVs from these slightly more left field companies, Mahindra and all this kind of stuff, because I think a lot of the big stuff we're seeing overseas in regards to the European thing, they've really got to supply Europe, so they're going to be really restricted to what they can send here, and it's going to be expensive. And out of China, well, some brands will come here. A lot of brands have just indicated they do not care about right-hand drive. It's too much for them. You know, you take some of the big brands, as we've seen indications from NIO, from I've lost it, but a pile of other, really fast-growing Chinese EV brands that they are focused on left-hand drive, and they're focused on America rather than focusing on going into markets like New Zealand and Australia. And generally, we're being focused on by companies who are wanting to go into things like the Thai market and those kind of things. We're kind of attached to the Southeast Asian kind of thing now. I almost think New Zealand and Australia are going to end up, previously New Zealand's followed Australia. I think we're both going to end up following Thailand and those kind of markets in the future. A prime example is VinFast. VinFast, I do not think we will see here for quite some time, because they have just simply gone, our first export market is going to be America. And that's where they're putting their effort. So, interesting from that. Mahindra, of course, they've been kind of dabbling along in the ute market and the SUV market for a while. They've found a bit of a following within the farming communities for their pickup. I think the pickup's actually a pretty decent truck.
I love the pickup.
The pickup is a cool thing. You're basically talking about something that you can spec out to be a 75% copy of a Land Cruiser 75 for $30,000.
Also, one of the best manuals I've driven in a long time as well.
It is, and you can now get an automatic one if you want, Matthew. Yeah. Graham's disgusted.
I've got a few little reservations here. Always got some reservations, right? That's why you have me on the show. I'm always a little bit cautious about just the number of brands coming bristling with new technology to market here in New Zealand, and not always with high degrees of downstream reliability or part supply or service center availability and all the bits and pieces that we kind of take for granted with the mainstream brands. And one of the reasons we like mainstream brands here as a dealer is because we know if you have to get stuff for it, we can get stuff for it. We go down the road to the dealer for Toyota or Hyundai or Ford or Kia or Mitsubishi, and all the stuff's there. And the public is in the same sort of position where you buy something that's a mainstream brand, particularly if it's newer technology. If stuff goes wrong, you've got backup for it around the corner, and no matter what that means. I'm always a little bit cautious about smaller or lesser known brands in New Zealand coming in with a limited infrastructure of support, supply, parts, service centers, and things like that on a product that's not necessarily well proven. And we end up being a bit of a test bed. And in the case of the EV sector right now, we know that there is resistance amongst some of the public to cross over to an EV, right? We know that. And one of the factors that will eventually overcome that is a combination of brute reliability and longevity of the product and getting rid of all the range anxiety issues and price. You sort of solve all those different things and the market will follow. But if you get that a little bit wrong and it just continues to tarnish the idea of, for example, EV ownership, because you've heard that the falafel that's just arrived in wasn't so good after all, and the EV battery system wasn't quite as smart as they thought it was, and it range was supposed to be 300 and it turned out to be 190, and you can't get parts for it in the South Island. It doesn't just tarnish the brand, it tarnishes the concept, because EVs right now are still as much a concept as they are a brand. And we don't want to tarnish that. We want to have good product here with really good backup so that people can buy with confidence, not just a particular brand, but the concept. And I'm a bit concerned about all these new players throwing pretty much anything out of the parts bin they can find and saying, hey, we've got an EV. Does it work? Well, it does now. But downstream, we want to make sure that the products that are here are good ones, and they're going to deliver what we need as the message to the public that they can have confidence in the concept.
Well, I'm going to throw another one into the hat for you just to piss you off some more, Graham. The SsangYong, they've got an EV launching as well. Very closely related, I believe, to the Mahindra UV400.
Yep.
It's the Corando E-Motion. It's sitting in my driveway at the moment. We're the first outlet in the country to get one. It's very good. Very good. Surprisingly good. Sorry if the SsangYong people think that I'm being rude by saying surprising, but surprisingly good. Sure.
The
Tonka toy styling was dated in 2013, but built very, very well. Fit and finish on this thing is exceptional. Drivetrain feels very, very good. Efficiency, very, very good. I've done about 150k testing so far, and from what I can see, it's got a range of about 365 kilometers. Real world, aircon on, driving like a Richard, which Graham knows is quite the report. So yeah, and look, you can say what you want about those other brands, but SsangYong, the SsangYong LDV operation they haven't always been perfect, but they're doing very well, I think, at the moment on parts availability. It's interesting. I've done a pass through their yard in Taupo. They are kind of really pushing for a 24-hour turnaround on parts to the point where they keep vehicles in stock to cannibalize if they need to.
Yeah.
To get stuff turned around quicker, which I think is quite admirable. And it also goes back to MG about a year or so in Australia basically said, look, we're not pushing any new models for quite some time in this market. Our big focus at the moment is improving parts and service to get some confidence out there and really cutting down those parts and supply times. And in fairness, we had a part that we needed for our MG. It wasn't a critical part, but wasn't something they had in the country, but they turned it around very quickly, and they turned it around at a reasonable price, which was interesting as well. And then it's taken us forever to get it fitted. So, but that bit's on us. Yeah. Any speculation on pricing for the MG4, Matthew?
Nothing quite yet, but I think probably the warning to issue is if you're someone who's sitting there going, oh, it's a hatchback, it's an MG, it's going to be much cheaper than the ZS EV, I would say hold fire on that.
Yeah.
According to, over in the UK, that thing's priced about 50 grand. So I would expect that it'll be about the same as a ZS here.
I think technically it's almost a bigger car than the ZS. Certainly from a interior perspective.
It's about the same. It's about the same in terms of dimensions.
It's a proper EV platform, which is great for space wise. It really goes head to head with the Volkswagen ID3, and the ID3 in New Zealand is going to be probably just short of 80 grand. So it's still going to be pushing a lot of value, but it's not going to be as cheap as some people think. Now the next story, and we'll keep this one fairly brief because it's the story that you'll love, Graham, is that Ford has unveiled the 2024 Mustang, and it's confirmed for New Zealand. Ford has unveiled its new look seventh generation, because it's still based on the current platform, Mustang at the North American Auto Show, with the model expected to double as a swan song for the brand's rich V8 heritage. In a release issued alongside the new Mustang's unveiling, Ford New Zealand confirmed the model would be landing in local showrooms late next year. Ford unveiled the new Mustang in its EcoBoost 4-cylinder and GT V8 formats, with later also shown off in a drop-top form. It also debuted the model's new flagship, the Dark Horse. So, I guess the key thing for you, Graham, is this will mean that there'll be at least a few people exiting their last generation one, making them maybe affordable enough for you to grab one early next year?
Well, no, because I think it's 2024, so we'll see these things probably, given that this is New Zealand, we'll actually see them in 2024 rather than just an American model cycle.
No. Ford New Zealand has confirmed it will be arriving here, late next year. So 2023.
So December. Same thing. So, yeah, I think Mustang owners typically tend to hang on to their cars pretty tightly. There's not what I'd call a huge raft of former Mustang owners busily cobbling out of their stuff right now. That's the beauty of them to an extent. There's a limited number being sold new, and there appears to be just as many buyers for them in the used marketplace than there ever was new. But man, have you seen that thing? It looks good. I've got to say, kudos to Ford America. If you're going to have a swan song, yeah, box tick from me. I'm in. That's a box tick. Looks really good.
Well, let's be clear. It's not the swan song of the Mustang. It's the swan song of the V8 Mustang.
Well, therefore, it's the swan song of the Mustang. Yes.
So we're guessing that means that after that we'll be seeing hybrids, and I would suggest probably some V6 turbo hybrids. Matthew, have you any thoughts or engines we might see after the V8?
One thing I want to just sort of acknowledge, I thought it was really interesting because I tuned in to watch the launch live, and it was the most V8 loving thing I've seen in a long time. You could almost be forgiven for thinking that maybe the V8 is going to keep on going forever based on the tone, the vibe of the launch, and how it was all delivered. But I guess sort of elephant in the room for those there who are presenting. That it's sort of likely to be. We'll see these models. We'll see Shelby models. We'll see, probably a few other models from Ford. Probably some big special last edition, the Dark Horse. Maybe, I don't know.
The Darth Vader edition.
And then I guess it'll be fully electrified, and there'll be an EV one in there somewhere. Yeah. I don't know if I like the look as much as you, Graham. I thought the race cars looked excellent. They revealed a whole bunch of renders of the Mustang in GT3 form, supercars form, GT4 form, all those. I thought they looked great. I think I'm more eager to see what it'll look like with Shelby bits on it.
Well, don't forget, Ford took a bit of a stick when they introduced the 2015 Euro styling of the 15 model. And I remember then all the stick they took about it not being the same as the old model, and there was all this talk about it being too Eurified and too smooth lines. And I personally thought even then it was one of the best looking cars that come out with it for a long time. And that styling has now endured really well, and arguably probably one of the outside of the original Mustangs, obviously. Let's forget about that, different story. Certainly one of the most successful design studies that Ford have had for that platform. So it's kind of hard to improve upon that, I would have thought. And I looked at this. I haven't seen all the photos that you've seen. I've only seen the ones that have been teased out on the interwebs. But it does look really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's flick on to a bit of last story that I've just been flicked on email by Mr. Hansen tucking away there. And it kind of turns back around to our discussion of performance cars near the start of it. A driver has traded a $400,000 performance car for a Nissan Leaf. I'm going to cut through a couple of the first parts, but Eagers Nissan in Brisbane has traded a Nissan Skyline R34 GTR V-Spec 2 for a brand new Nissan Leaf, and what the dealership said was a straight swap. With rising fuel prices, Barry couldn't justify keeping his R34 GTR V-Spec 2 any longer. Luckily for him, we were able to do a straight swap into a brand new, fully electric Nissan Leaf.
Bullshit!
Yeah. The cheapest locally advertised GTR is priced at a whopping $288,880, with two other examples listed on TradeMe for $320,000 and a staggering $449,990. Now, I actually think some of those prices are bullshit anyway, and people are just fishing with them. What do you think that car's really worth, Graham?
It's worth
R34 GTR V-Spec.
Yeah, okay. I've got a friend of mine in Adelaide with one tucked away in his garage, believe it or not, which he bought when they were actually affordable. You know what? If you've got that sort of stuff for sale right now, you can ask pretty much whatever you want, depending on the condition of it and the colour, which has a big bearing on R34 prices.
Bayside blue for this one.
Bayside blue for the win, and my friend has a Bayside blue one, just quietly. Look, they're reaching telephone numbers everywhere around the world. The Americans have got on board with them. Yep. You know, if the dealership traded it in for a straight, this is Facebook clickbait stuff, isn't it? You pulled this off some dodgy Facebook site advertising male enhancement devices and bits and pieces, didn't you? I know, Matthew, because it just isn't true. No one in their right mind, and then I would say if they did do it, and the dealership actually did a straight swap for a brand new Nissan Leaf, no matter how good the Nissan Leaf might be, then somebody somewhere got absolutely tucked.
Well, there's a couple of other options here. Look, I mean, we're only seeing like the side of the car. Maybe the other side was ripped off. Maybe he kept the engine. Maybe the thing.
No.
I think by far the most likely maybe is Eagers thought this would get 15,000 reactions on Facebook. Let's post it for a laugh.
Exactly.
And it has.
Maybe it had $350,000 worth of finance attached to it.
Yeah, it's like beware of the clickbait stories, Matthew.
Now,
I acknowledge what I believe this story is in our article, which audience members are free to read on AutoTalk and on EVs and Beyond.
Now this may be clickbait, but I actually have and I will go out and hunt out the details for this later on. But I have a comparative thing for this, in that I know an Auckland dealer recently that had bought his partner a Tesla Model 3, and was then, because they wanted to try one, they wanted to see what it was like. They had EVs coming to for their own brands, and then when their own brands arrived, he swapped her into one of the brand's electric vehicles, which I think the sales team immediately flogged around Hampton Downs. He swapped that car, and I believe a straight swap as well, for an R32 GTR. Now, I can't recall what type of Tesla it was, and if it was a Model 3 Performance, then maybe that might be slightly closer to the numbers, because I'm not entirely sure what an R32 GTR is running at these days, Graham. You might have some numbers for me. 100 grand? Yeah, so that's actually not as an extreme of a difference.
No. If it was a slightly tatty R32 and it needed, so let's wound the realm from sort of 70 to 120 for a GTR, depending on its condition. And then obviously we've got the outliers at the other end, the sort of the mega build cars. But even a complete wreck these days that you basically pulled out of the swamp somewhere near Sapporo is still worth huge money. But you can believe that story, because we don't know exactly what the GTR was like, and the gulf of difference is not huge. But I don't buy for a minute the R34 story. That's just hype. It really is.
So I believe he's keeping that car, because of course you would.
What? Yeah, the Skyline. Yeah. Watch the money grow. But this is the Australian motoring media for you, and you know, the truth is out there somewhere. Just got to go looking for it.
Well, no, hang on, Mr. Conspiracy Theory. This is not the Australian motoring media. This is Eagers on Facebook. This is the largest dealer group in Australia on Facebook. This is a dealer that has done this, not the media.
got a reaction, didn't it? I know. Yes, I know. But you've picked it up.
Yeah, well,
job done.
You can blame Matthew for that.
Hey, I was number 15,000 in the queue to pick this up. Okay, the story's going to go everywhere today. I strongly suspect. It has like 12,000 shares. It's got 50. It's riding it to the moon. Basically, is what they're doing.
Yeah, I'll hear about it this week.
Anyway, on that bombshell, we'll let you guys go. Matthew, what donut have you eaten so far, and what donut is next on the menu?
I was going to have the simple sugar, but I think the missus would like that one. So that one's going to stay, well, maybe stay to the end of the day. Sprinkles next, I reckon, Richard. Sprinkles.
Right. I'm starting a diet so I can all be trim and fit my suit again for AutoTalk Live. So I'll enjoy a gross chemically laced protein shake.
What? Oops. Okay. I didn't get that memo, Richard.
Oh well. You're a trim fit man, Graham. Anyway, well, this was certainly a good podcast. This was one for the ages. So I'll look. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Graham and Matthew, and we'll catch everyone next week.
Happy weekend.